Okay. Call the meeting to order with prayer. Almighty God, we ask for your guidance and direction as we come together to meet. Grant us the strength to manage the challenges ahead and the wisdom to identify these as opportunities as we strive to serve the citizens of Crescent Springs. As we make decisions on behalf of them, grant us the gift of open mind, willingness to learn, and humility to accept the ideas of others. Please help us recognize diversity as a blessing and unity as our strength. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call.
Matt Zack.
Here.
Tom Bergamini.
Here.
Carter Dickerson.
Here.
Christy Arlinghouse. Mike Daugherty.
Here.
Bob Mueller.
Here.
Okay, next item is approval of minutes, December 11th, 2017 council meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of December 11, 2017.
Christie's made the motion.
I'll second.
Mike second. Roll call.
Tom Bergamini.
Yes.
Carter Dickerson.
Yes.
Christy Arlinghouse.
Yes.
Mike Daugherty.
Yes.
Bob Mueller.
Yes.
Matt Zack.
Yes.
Okay, next item is December 18th special meeting minutes. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of December 18th.
Matt's made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mike second.
Carter Dickerson.
Yes.
Christy Arlinghouse.
Yes.
Mike Daugherty.
Yes.
Bob Mueller.
Yes.
Matt Zack.
Yes.
Tom Bergamini.
Yes.
Okay. Next item is city audit presentation. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, do you have anything you want to?
Just an introduction. I think folks on council are familiar with Jim Sparrow from Rankin and Rankin, who has been doing our audit for, I'd say, the last
Several years.
handful of years. So Jim is here again to present the audit and financial statements for our year ending June 30th, 2017.
Thank you. Everyone should have a copy of the audit report. Beginning on page 1 is the independent auditor's report. That's our report on your financial statements. The first paragraph indicates that we have audited the financial statements of the governmental activities as of and for the year ended June 30th, 2017. The second paragraph indicates that it is management's responsibility for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. The third paragraph is the auditor's responsibility. Our responsibility is to express opinions on these financial statements based on our audit. And at the very bottom of page 1, it indicates that we believe the audit evidence that we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinion or opinions. And on the top of page 3 is the opinion paragraph, which indicates that in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the city as of June 30th, 2017, and the respective changes in financial position and where applicable cash flows thereof for the year that ended in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. This is called an unqualified opinion, which means there were no qualifications or exceptions to our opinion on your financial statements, and it's the highest level of opinion that a CPA firm renders on financial statements. Page 5 is the beginning of the section called Management's Discussion and Analysis. This section is the representation of the city and is intended to inform readers of the financial statements just general principles that the financial statements are presented on, and some highlights and other summaries of factors of the city's year that has been under audit. I'll just mention under financial highlights toward the very top of page 5, the city's cash balances decreased $119,000 compared to the prior year, and the total fund balances decreased $30,000. Revenues from taxes increased about $4,000, whereas revenues from payroll, insurance, and license fees decreased by about $27,000. Overall expenditures decreased $221,000, primarily in the Public Works and Capital Outlay Department. That would be a function of having fewer street repairs that you undertook in the 17 year compared to 2016. Otherwise, I think you're pretty much a break-even year financially. Going over to page 8. Page 8 is one place in the financial statements that gives a comparison of the last two fiscal years, 16 compared to 17. About midway down the page, on page 8, are the revenues of the city. Total revenues for 2016 were $2,647,000 compared to $2,506,000 in 2017. One reason that it is less in governmental presentations, loan proceeds are considered to be revenue. So you borrowed some money for equipment in 2016. You did not have that in 2017. So that was a reduction of $100,000 there. The other categories, again, were pretty comparable between 2016 and 2017. Charges for services, you might note, not a big number, but it did increase some, and you had some special events and activities. I think there was a festival for the year, so revenues from those activities are in that charges for services and were more in 2017 compared to 16. At the very bottom are your major departments and the expenditures of those departments. The total 16 number was $2,758,000 and the 17 number is $2,537,000, so expenditures were somewhat less than what they were in the prior year. If you look at the third item, Public Works and Capital Outlay, as I mentioned previously, you had a lower amount of expenditures relative to roads and street repairs, those types of things. So that accounts for the decrease in expenditures for the year. Turning to the next page, page 9, about midway down the page is the category of debt. Just wanted to mention that the city does not have any long-term debt, with the exception that at the end of 17 you still had a small amount of payments left on the equipment loan that you had taken out in 2016. So unless something new comes up when that debt is paid in your current year, then the city will not have any debt. So congratulations, that's a very nice place to be. I'll go over to page 11, which is called the Statement of Net Position. This statement is one that's intended to present your financial statements in more of a business-like presentation. And by that, what makes this statement different from another statement we'll look at is that under the assets, you have capital assets, which is the city's building, the park, and other assets such as fire and police equipment and vehicles. So it does present those assets. Then it does present liabilities, including long-term liabilities, and that would be mortgages and those types of things, which you don't currently have. The one number under liabilities I will mention is the line item called net pension liability, $601,000. That is the city's allocated share of the deficit of the CERS pension fund. So your number is rather low compared to most of the other cities because you do not have hazardous employees. You contract out police and fire services, so you do not have that. So this represents the what's called non-hazardous category of the pension fund, and it's not anticipated that you would need to pay that liability, but it could represent the fact that over the number of years, your contribution amount may increase in paying into the CERS fund. The other two financial statements on pages 13 and 14 are the traditional governmental presentation that does not include the fixed assets and long-term debt. So it's more current assets and current liabilities. The first line item, cash, is $1,650,000, so that's at the end of the fiscal year. That was the total cash that the city had. Probably comparing to other cities, maybe a fairly low dollar amount of cash. But I think you all operated on a pretty tight budget for quite some time. Your fund balance, about halfway down the page, $1,810,000, that's the right-hand column, is pretty reflective of the cash. You do not have a lot of other current assets and current liabilities. On page 14, statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Total revenues for the year were $2,506,000. Total expenditures $2,537,000. So you had a expenditures over revenues of about $30,000. So your fund balance decreased from $1,944,000 to $1,913,000. So all in all, I think a pretty break-even year. Your expenditures in income also was very close to what you had budgeted for the year, so you were pretty much on target with that. So that really concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, be glad to try to answer them.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, the only other item maybe to talk about, Jim, is the very last page, of page 37, which really deals with the segregation of duties. And it's something that has been noted in our audits for many years, in the fact that we are a very small city and we do have a very limited staff. So it's very difficult for us as a city to have a whole lot of different responsibilities and different controls in place because we only have a few employees. So this has been denoted in years past, so again, I want to address it again, that we do take measures as we can to make sure that we have segregation of duties, that we make sure we have checks and balances. As an example, I think it's denoted here in the text, any check that goes out gets two different signers. Typically that's Christy and myself. If one of us is out of town, the mayor may sign it. But again, it's also, then there's a third party who's a member of our finance committee who volunteers to kind of review the books before they close. So the point being, we're trying to keep a lot of eyes on it, which is important for a city with a small number of employees because there just isn't enough resources to kind of do the segregation duty. So I just wanted to.
And I might mention that I do meet with the finance committee after the conclusion of the audit, and that is an area that we talk about each year, and look at whether there's anything different. You do also have newer staff now since April, and so again, when you have new people involved, it's a good time to take a look at who does what and look at those internal controls.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Be on my way to Fort Mitchell.
Okay. Next item is Fire Authority report. Mike?
Fire Authority met a couple weeks ago. It is our turn to be chairperson. As you know, that rotates every other year between us and Villa Hills. I am the chairperson for the next calendar year, when we revert back to Villa Hills. We did sign, or agree to sign, I assume that outgoing Chairman Ringo signed the contract for the new ambulance. It's approximately $205,000, which is a little bit less than what we, in our mind, were afraid it might cost. but still more than we had hoped it would. We should get a report sometime in January on the billing for the unincorporated areas. Tax bills are due December 31st. You always keep that push at, is it October 31st for the early birds? Then end of the month, end of the year, get the rest. So hopefully we're going to see the remaining coming at that time.
Okay. All right, thanks, Mike. Finance report, Matt?
And the finance reporting obviously has taken a big chunk of time with the audit, so I won't give a whole lot of details other than I'll share the 12/31 6-month numbers with everyone. That special report, I'll send that out so you have that electronically. I've not had a chance to pull what April's pulled together so far because we are short in the month so far. But I will share that. But again, just a comment back on the audit report. Again, it continues to show that we're in very strong fiscal shape. Which is, again, kudos to this council for making sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. The fact that we are, essentially debt-free. Again, we did take out that loan to buy those 3, he kept calling it equipment, but it was vehicles. Those are the trucks that we bought, the dump truck and some of the pickup trucks. Again, shows that we're in great shape. So, again, we're not, going crazy with money. I think I had mentioned in the last meeting, we're talking about looking at some small short-term investments. I don't think we're ready to make that decision yet, but I will share that data with you when I have the data put together. So,
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay, Public Works, Dewey.
We're in the process of our tree recycling now on Park and Ride. I think we've got about 200 trees down there already. People bringing them down, we're picking them up. We're starting to take down Christmas decorations. We've seen 2 or 3 snowfalls. We had the ice this morning. Made it through that with no problems. We've had to make a couple of repairs on 2 of the dump trucks. Minor repairs are already been taken care of. And we probably used about 75 tons of salt, so we're in good shape.
Okay. Thanks, Dewey. Okay, hand me that, please. The only thing I got is I passed out a brochure to each one of you to please consider being a Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame city. What that entails is that once a year we would nominate a veteran to go into the Hall of Fame. That's basically what it comes down to, which I'd like to see us become a Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame city.
So do we need a
Well, I guess we need a,
resolution?
what do we need, a resolution or?
I would think a resolution.
Yeah.
what is the process for nominating a veteran to the Hall of Fame? Is that just paperwork that we submit downstate or
Well, we submitted to HB Deathridge in Florence.
in Florence? Okay.
It would be just an application type or a form that could be filled out by anybody, veteran, any resident or, anybody in the city.
Is there a time frame for submission?
I think there is, but he
I
didn't,
mean, we could put it in the newsletter.
Yes.
We might get
Yes. Yeah.
one that we don't know
Right.
of. If we knew what the deadline was, we could put it in the next newsletter.
find
It's
that out,
coming up in the next couple of months.
Sheriff Kortzenborn gave me this Saturday at the mayor's group meeting, but it doesn't have a time on it. But I'll find out,
Okay.
let you know.
Yeah, I mean, again, given that we have the Veterans Memorial in our city, I mean, I think that is kind of a no-brainer that we would support that, so.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any reason that's on there?
George said he didn't know if they were showing up or not.
Okay. I don't think, is there anybody here from the BNB short-term rentals? I didn't think so. Mr. Huffman and Mr. Hermes did, I don't see you on the list here. Did you have something that you wanted to bring before us?
No, sir, I was just here in case
Right.
I needed to be here in case you
Okay.
had questions, you know.
Okay.
Regarding the text amendment.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. The next item is Alex Koppelman from PDS, zone change on small area study.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I believe you have the regulations that are before you tonight to make a text amendment to the IP zone and to add the mixed commercial zone. I've presented this a few times to Council and Economic Development Committee, so I won't really get into the specifics of the regulations tonight. But I can tell you that the text amendment was heard before the Kenton County Planning Commission. There was no one in opposition to the text amendment. We had one member of the public speak in favor, and the Planning Commission gave a unanimous recommendation to approve the text amendment. With that said, I'll answer any questions there are about the regulations.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Alex?
I only have one, because I'm about to read this long-winded ordinance, and I remember from being at the meeting that one condition to the text amendment was that churches would be allowed.
That's correct.
And what I want to incorporate into this before the second reading would be what other condition, if any, that I need to enumerate. I know churches was one of the conditions is that the houses in this area are under no obligation to change their structure, change their, they can be sold as houses. If they are demolished by, say, by a fire, they can rebuild. They can continue as is. They don't have to conform to and sell commercially. I was approached by three or four residents after the meeting. Bob and I both were after this last meeting on Thursday, and talked about the map amendment. But the ordinance is short on the conditions, and I didn't have time to call you. Frankly, I've been in trial or out of town today, so I didn't have a chance to call you to make sure I had them all. That's the only thing I would need from you.
Yeah, the Planning Commission made a condition to allow churches and other places of worship as a conditional use in the MC zone. It's not currently in there the way the MC zone is drafted, so it's conditioned on now where you can put that into the first reading. It would be included as a conditional use in the MC zone. And what that means is if a church or other place of worship wanted to develop somewhere in that area, they'd first have to go through the Board of Adjustment.
Okay. Bob, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think I'd echo what Alex said. It was
Okay.
unanimous approval of amendments.
I think the only thing we'd want to add, I looked at it, but I didn't see it in there, but consistent with the MLU zones, both of them that we've adopted recently, that we have a provision in there that any new development be subject to a development agreement.
Yeah, development agreements are, especially in those areas where the MLU zone is, or there's large acres of land where you only have one development or a couple developments happen every so often. This specific area, I think you would be getting a lot of development agreements, which would require a lot of.
If one of the things is to have consistency in what newer buildings would look like, that's where you would want the development agreement.
Sure, I think when we were working with the city administration to draft the regulations, part of the MC zone was to promote economic development and kind of more streamline the process for a developer to make it easier for someone to come in, but it would still go through a stage 1 and stage 2 development plan process. So all of the requirements of the zoning ordinance would have to be
That's not
met.
consistent with what the small area study recommended. The small area study did recommend development agreements.
I don't believe that that's in the small area study, but I can look.
It is, believe me, it is.
George had said something about
Well,
a development agreement for a new zone, but not for a zone that we're changing.
So,
No, we are changing the zone, we're changing 6 zones to 1 zone. What
That's the MC, but on the IP, I think, isn't he just
Yeah, the only thing,
adding text to a current zone?
yeah, the IP.
right,
just
the IP is just, yeah, just amending the requirements, and that's, I'm just adding some additional uses that are permitted, and some, changes to, outdoor storage.
Because I seem to recall him saying they tried to put in the restrictions to what they were adding. I wouldn't say to avoid a development agreement, but to accomplish the same purpose.
So the MLU2 zone, it's on the east side of Buttermilk Pike. So if a development agreement is discussed in a small area study, I think it would probably be referring to that, just larger tracts of land where you.
Now, the MLU2 is does not constitute larger tracts of land. The MLU zone, where Buttermilk Town Center is, that was the largest tract of land.
Sure.
That was the first time we had a development agreement in it. We incorporated that same concept into the MLU2 zone, and when we discussed the small area study 5 or 6 years ago, the same concept was to apply there, because if somebody came in and wanted to do a wholesale or whole-scale redevelopment of that land, we want to make sure that it's consistent with what the city desires. Otherwise, we have no control whatsoever over what goes up there.
Okay. The way the MC zone's drafted, it requires stage 1 and stage 2, so no development.
I understand that, but the development agreement is part of the ultimate development, including the stage 1 and stage 2. And the development agreements that we're using now is to assure that architecturally and signage are consistent with what the whole area should look like. Otherwise, you're gonna have a mismatch of what we've got up there now, and that's not what was never intended. I mean, that area up there developed because it just sort of happened. Nobody really sort of thought it out in the first place, and that's what the whole purpose behind the development agreement is for, is to think about that, and how does it fit, and how does all the pieces of the puzzle ultimately fit together, so there's some consistent theme throughout it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same. It's not intended to be onerous, but it's intended to be a planned development area.
Okay.
Does the city have the right to require one by
If you-
development?
If you don't have one, you have no control whatsoever.
I agree, Tom, but if somebody were to submit a stage 1 or come and say, we want to do something, we want to submit a stage 1, could the city, by individual development, say, we need one here, we don't need a one
No,
there?
stage 1s are needed everywhere.
The development agreement.
I think the problem that you run into there is that and Buttermilk Town Center is a good example. If you didn't have a consistent development agreement, let's say the outlots were different than the main building, then you would have just a mix mash of design and that sort of stuff. And that's what the whole development agreement concept was for. And also keep in mind is absent a zone change or a request for economic incentives, the city has little control whatsoever over what goes in there.
As long as that's a conforming use.
Right, and that was one of the big concerns with Buttermilk Town Center. I mean, they had everything that they wanted to do to build whatever they want. But because of the fact that they wanted an economic incentive, we had some leverage over to how it looked like and how it ultimately came out. And so I think that's important from the perspective of the city, because, we don't want to be restricted. We just want to work with the developer to make sure that, whatever their development is successful, and it's also what we ultimately intended or desired to go up there.
So if we had, and I'm going to throw a number out there, if there were 50 parcels up there that could potentially be developed, are you saying you want to require that each one would submit one?
No,
or it's up
I
to
don't
the
think
city?
you want to do that. I think it's probably for the larger and the newer developments. I'll give you a good example. When, and it wasn't so much with the development agreement, but when McDonald's expanded, they tore down the old McDonald's and brought a new one. There were some things that we wanted as a city, and some things McDonald's wanted. For instance, McDonald's wanted 2 signs, which they weren't allowed to have. but we needed a widening of the street, so they gave us the widening of the street, and we agreed to the two signage. I think if that's all addressed in the development agreement, you can just streamline that whole thing. And the other thing with the development agreement, especially if there's design criteria, and that was in the original.
Yeah, there's design criteria.
The design criteria are there so that a developer comes in and says, okay, what are my buildings supposed to look like? Give me some sense of what they're supposed to look like. And that helps the developer up front because they know that they're not gonna have to change for every little development. But I agree with you, I mean, there's so many lots up there.
And that's what I was pointing out, is that I understand.
No, we
where
don't
you
need them for
have it.
everyone, but I think if there's a certain size, and we could either restrict it to size or type of development, the development agreement should be part of that equation.
Can you get with Jordan and Mike and figure out how to word that in there? Because I mean, if it's in the small area study, I mean, we should be consistent. If it's not, then I think we have to find the language that accomplishes what Tom's talking about.
Okay, I can take a look into that before the second reading.
All right. Mike, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, any more questions? Okay. First reading of ordinance 2018-1.
An ordinance number 2018-1, an ordinance of the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky, approving text amendments to the Crescent Springs zoning ordinance, adding several light industrial uses to the permitted uses within the IP-1 Industrial Park 1 zone, adding outdoor self-storage units as an accessory use to a warehousing and wholesaling establishment, along with development, controls, and updates to the outdoor storage industrial performance standards of the IP1 zone, and adding a new zoning classification, the MC Mixed Commercial Zone, to Article 10 zones, along with the necessary cross-references to the other sections of the zoning code, permitting a variety of commercial, retail, service, and office uses within the organized development. Whereas the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky engaged with Planning and Development Services of Kenton County, PDS, to draft text amendments to the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky zoning code to create a new zone known as an MC Mixed Commercial Zone, as well as drafting text amendments to the Crescent Springs zoning ordinance that one, adds several light industrial uses to the list of permitted, should say uses, not used, within the IP1 Industrial Park 1 zone. 2, adding outdoor and self-storage units as an accessory use to warehousing and wholesaling establishment, along with the development, controls, and updates to the outdoor storage industrial performance standards of the IP1 zone. And whereas the Kenton County Municipal Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing on December 7th, 2017, and said commission recommended text amendments to the zoning code of the City of Crescent Springs with regard to the modification to certain definitions in the Crescent Springs zoning code, which adopted the amendments to the IP-1 Industrial Park 1 zone as set forth above, and further added a new zone classification, the MC Mixed Commercial Zone, along with necessary cross-references to other sections of the zoning ordinance to permit a variety of commercial, retail, service, and office used within an organized development with certain conditions, consolidating zones LHS, PO, R1G, and NSC zones in the Gateway Small Area Study. And whereas the legislative body of the City of Crescent Springs, having duly considered the record, hereby adopts the recommendation of the Kenton County Municipal Planning and Zoning Commission with regard to the amendments to the IP1 zone and the adoption of a new zoning classification, the MC Mixed Commercial Zone, as set forth in Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference, including the conditions as stated by PDS. Now therefore be ordained by the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky as follows. Section 1, that the zoning code of the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky is hereby amended as set forth on the attached Exhibit A. Section 2, all ordinances or parts of ordinances and conflict herein, or to the extent of any such conflict, if any, are hereby repealed.
Mike, did you want to lay out the logistics of how we were going to do this? These are the text amendments, and we have
So
the
the text amendment, last Thursday, Bob and I attended the meeting of the commission, and Alex made a presentation in which the map amendment that is the companion to this was adopted without any substantive comment. I would say it was adopted as presented. And so the conditions were imposed by the meeting last month regarding the church, and so I mean the two very much kind of go together. But they voted last Thursday, and we need to do that next month.
Right, so the map amendment was voted on last Thursday. Also unanimous recommendation to approve. The text amendment just adds the regulations to the list of zones in the zoning ordinance, and the map amendment implements it into that area. And we'll have the summary of evidence back for that in a few weeks from the commission secretary.
Okay, thank
I think logistically, we were thinking we would do this second reading of 18-1 at a special meeting before the caucus this month. The first reading of the map amendment ordinance at that same special, and then the second reading of the map amendment ordinance in the
February meeting.
the regular February meeting. Is that right?
That is, we had discussed that. That is subject to a couple things. One, that Alex and I can get this language clarified, as we talked about. And secondly, assuming my brother is here on January 22nd, because I will be out of town.
What you could do is the first reading of the map amendment, then do second readings at the regular council meeting.
Yeah, we could do that.
That way you
Okay.
get both at the same time.
Okay. Chief, would you like to address the council?
If most of you don't know me already, I'm Chief Brian Allen with the Ville Hills Police Department. We've worked together to get the contract together. We have started ramping up to begin the transition over July 1st to policing here, if the contract is accepted. We got a little bit of work ahead of us, but it'll be fine. There may be some bumps here or there, but again, it'll work itself out. We're committed to making this a good partnership with this community, and we're going to work very hard to make sure that you have a great police department here. So,
Where do you
Got any
stand with
questions?
getting spots in the police academy if you're hiring new officers?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Where do you stand with getting
Right now, I'm
spots in
working
the
with
police?
DOCJT. To be quite honest with you, it is a mess down there right now. So I'm calling them every day. I have one gentleman ready to get a slot. I am waiting for his drug screen to come back before they'll process him, but there are some spots in the April class. So I've been in contact with them. As soon as I can get the drug screen done and completed, they'll process him, and hopefully he'll be in there. I have 3 people testing January 10th for the second spot. We will be hiring 2 officers January 17th. There's another 2 officers that I'm looking at, and one of them we'll probably hire in April. If she works out, she's a military police officer. She will not have to go to the academy, so that's a plus. She'll be treated as a lateral entry. And then the other one is a lateral entry that we'll probably bring in around the May timeframe. So around July 1, depending on when I get the academy slots, I may be 1 officer short, but we'll cover that with scheduling and overtime, so it won't be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to say anything about the July 1st
Oh,
start
yes,
date?
yes. We did have this conversation. There was a conversation between myself, Don Kiley, Tommy Thompson of the Kent County Dispatch Center, and I believe the Erlanger City Administrator was involved in it. The idea, July 1st is a Sunday. It's a bad day to do a switchover, because what we have to do is we have to transfer the 911 lines to Kent County from Erlanger. We also have to transition the CAD system So the date everybody seems to like is June 27th. That's a Wednesday. The reason that date is good, it's middle of the week. Everybody can be ready to go in case we have any hiccups, like we always will when we do a transfer. So Don Kiley will have Cincinnati Bell ready for the Cincinnati 911 lines. Tommy Thompson will have a CAD system. If we have a hiccup, we'll have people here that we can transition right away. The reason it's so complicated is because we're moving from one dispatch center to another dispatch center, so we can't move the 911 lines because then Erlanger won't get any calls. So I think we're all in agreement that we'll go ahead and start it around 10 a.m. on the 27th, which is a Wednesday, and it should be hopefully a flawless transition. But that's why I want to move it. The next week, if we go into the week after July 1st, we have July 4th, so nobody's going to be here. So it's going to be kind of problematic to get everybody on board. So that's what we're thinking right now. It's looking like that's what we're going to do.
And Chief, how confident are you that you can provide the coverage with 5 men? The mayor, after a meeting, your mayor, after a meeting a couple months ago, told the press, where I've been told he misspoke, but since you're here, that he's going to need 6 men to cover it. And that was in the paper. So I'm curious as how sure you are that 5's your number.
I would never have given you 5 if I didn't think we could do it. Based on your calls for service, which is the information that I've gotten, based on what they are, the time of day. I have 7 on my department, so an additional 5. I'm pretty sure I can cover your areas.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, pretty sure. I mean, I don't see any problem in it. I'm going by the numbers that you're asking me to do. I've run the schedule. I've got a schedule together. I don't see any issues unless there's something I'm missing, but I haven't missed anything. I've looked over everything that I've been given as far as the numbers go, the calls for service. If you break down your calls for service, it has 10,000 as the number, but you got to break down what those numbers are. I think it was like 4,200 were calls for service, that's actual radio calls. About 1,500 were self-initiated traffic stops. Business checks are self-initiated activity. Accidents, those take a different time period, but those are easy to do. So you got to take out the self-initiated activity, and then what are your real calls for service? Real calls for service are around 5,000 instead of the 10,000 one. So based on that number, I'm confident we can do it with 5.
And still, I mean, you're saying taking out the self-initiated, the business checks, and that those will still happen. So I assume they're still going to happen.
Yeah, they still happen.
So it's going to make the number from 5,000 to 6,500 if you said it was 1,500
Well, I maybe I misspoke. When I'm talking about calls for service, I'm talking about radio calls that we get to go to a call. So based on your number, there are 5,000. Calls for service can be done during the patrol time. In other words, if I stop out and do a business, if I'm doing patrol work and I stop at a business, I'm doing a special area check or a business check. If I'm going to do a vacation check, I stop by the house and do a vacation check. Those are during the patrol time. It's not initiated, it's not called by the radio to go do it. It's still getting completed. So when I say calls for service, I mean actual radio runs. Dispatch calls you and dispatches to a scene. That's why I'm counting them. That's why I'm saying that number calls for service. All the other stuff will still get done. It's not, it's just, you just do it during the patrol time. You do it all the time there. We'll say 6,700 calls for service. If you look at my numbers, they say 6,700. But if you look at what radio calls I get, it's more like 3,000. Because those are actual calls, radio calls. The rest of it we do during patrol time all the time.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Okay, next item, second reading ordinance 2017-14, authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with the city of Villa Hills, Kentucky to provide police service.
Ordinance 2017-14, an ordinance of the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky, authorizing the mayor of the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky to execute on behalf of the city a contract with the City of Villa Hills, Kentucky to provide police services. Be it ordered by the mayor and the legislative body of the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky, that the mayor is hereby authorized to execute on behalf of the city a contract with the City of Villa Hills, Kentucky to provide police services to the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky. A draft of said contract appears as Exhibit A and is subject to the approval of the City of Villa Hills, Kentucky and the Attorney General or Department of Local Government. Everyone has been provided with the last draft that I had as of Friday. Other than the possible changeover in date as described by the chief tonight, the only other matter that I think may have some revision would be the paragraph 3.8 about what I would call administrative matters, police reports and the like. There was an email from Mr. Bohannon sometime today. I was in Frankfurt most of the day, so I'm not sure what time it came in, that he wanted to make sure that the City of Villa Hills is on the same page with the City of Crescent Springs on that. I don't see it as anything really material. Again, Ms. Stewart is occupied with a death in her family, so I'm not able to clarify that today. But other than that, I think the contract that you all received on Friday is going to be the final product.
Do you explain what the section 3.8 entails?
We wanted to make sure that residents of the city would be able to come to the city and receive a police report free of charge. And I think that's essentially what Villa Hills does. But they have a charge to provide a police report to insurance companies. And it's little matters like that they want to make sure that we are in agreement with. It has really nothing to do with what I'll call substantive policing. It's more administrative, make sure the paperwork's in order, which is part of policing, I understand, don't get me wrong. As a lawyer, I certainly understand the importance of paper.
So if we change over on June 27th, is there a financial liability to the city for the remaining days of the month of June?
As I understand it, we will be paying Erlanger through the end of the month.
Yeah.
And Villa Hills will be
And they're
paying
willing
as
to
of
do
July
it,
1.
the coverage for,
And they're going to cover as
Okay.
part of the contract.
Okay.
Since that's a second reading, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2017-14.
Okay, Matt's made a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Bob, second. Roll call.
Carter Dickerson,
Yes.
Matt Zeck,
Yes.
Bob Mueller,
Yes.
Christy Arlinghouse,
no,
Mike Daughtry,
No.
Tom Bergamini,
Now,
Okay, it's 3-3 tied. I vote to approve the contract with Villa Hills. Motion passes 4-3. Okay, next item, new business. Reading of municipal order 2018-1, authorizing the mayor to acquire a donation of approximately 4 acres off Riverwatch for use as a recreational area.
Prior to reading it, let me state that my office did a title exam on these 3 particular lots. There is nothing that would cause the city any liability in my view. So, municipal order 2018-1, a municipal order of the City of Crescent Springs, Kentucky, authorizing the mayor to accept and execute necessary documents to take title to real estate from Robert and Michelle Marshall, whereas Robert and Michelle Marshall own real estate located at 734 Riverwatch, 738 Riverwatch, and 1779 Highwater located in Crescent Springs, Kentucky, and whereas the Marshalls wish to donate the aforesaid real estate to the City of Crescent Springs, and whereas the city wishes to accept the real estate in order to turn said undeveloped land into a park for the benefit of the residents of the city of Crescent Springs, and whereas it appears to be in the interest of the city to create additional parkland for the use of the residents of the city, now therefore be it ordained by the mayor and the city council of the city of Crescent Springs, Kentucky, that the mayor is hereby authorized to accept the real estate located at and commonly known as 734 Riverwatch, 738 Riverwatch, and 1779 Highwater, located in Crescent Springs, Kentucky, on behalf of the city of Crescent Springs, Kentucky. The mayor is further authorized to execute any and all necessary documents, including a deed, to accept said properties. Under Kentucky law, both the, I'll use the term seller and buyer, donor and donee in this case, are required to sign the deed insofar as the consideration is stated, which is zero. They essentially are getting a tax donation.
So why are these people willing to donate the property, and can you give me some idea of where the property is? I know where Riverwatch is, but.
It's off
Out of the end.
Drive. If you come over Point Drive or
Here.
Riverwatch, you go
Christie.
straight down over the hill, and it's between two houses down there.
And what do the neighbors think about having a recreational
A walking
area?
trail?
Yeah.
It's,
do they-
it's basically a walking trail.
So there right now is basically a long driveway that goes nowhere. After the caucus meeting when this came up, I drove back there. It literally is a house and a driveway that just goes nowhere. That's the property of the entrance to where we're talking about.
Driveway, does the driveway belong to one of the lots, or is it an easement?
And I think it comes up to the lot.
That's the question, is it an
Yeah.
easement, or is it actually feed to one of the lots?
It looks like the lot driveway runs parallel to this section, this first section of this donated area, so they look parallel, not overlapping.
Yeah, this is high water. This is high water up here.
Is there any access to it from Highwater?
It looks, I mean,
Yeah.
they're this far apart on the map.
Yeah.
April-
I remember it's a real long sliver and then
And they
it
don't,
spans
and they don't
out.
touch, the map doesn't touch, and then down here.
April,
They've
April
got-
can tell you.
This one doesn't
Riverwatch.
have all of
Over
it.
the hill.
I know generally where it is. I live on
Does
it.
it? They've got the better one.
Good point.
It does.
Whose driveway?
Tom, I'll get clarification.
Does that give us, access?
It's that real long sliver.
But we need to.
Access from the high water and
Yes,
property.
that road
They
is
donate
right
this
there.
with districts.
That driveway, I'm calling that driveway.
Right, but I think Tom makes a
So-
good point. Who owns the driveway?
Mike,
Even though I think it's generally understood that probably will.
granted, this isn't a legal title, but if you look at it, it looks like an easement.
I'll clarify it. I have been in contact with the marshal's attorney, who's Paul Markgraf. I mean, until we have that point clarified, there's no need to execute it. Yes, sir.
Have the residents, the property that's adjacent to the property besides the donating party, have they been apprised of the fact that it will be used for recreational use, this property? Because you do give away part of your privacy when you have a walking
Yeah.
trail. I know that from
Yeah,
personal.
that was gonna be, my question is, do we, by accepting this, are we committing to anything? I.e., what I mean by that is, do we have to put the kind of structure there in 45 days? Do we have to create a park? Do we have to make it what? I mean, it doesn't sound like there's any restrictions. I have to make sure before I,
What you?
That's just all that the land would really be good for, other than
so
sitting there like it
I
is.
totally agree with you. Looking at the topography of it, it doesn't look like it's gonna be usable for much.
Right.
But where I'm concerned about is someone says, hey, let's put a walking trail back there. Great. People have to park their cars somewhere to get to the walking trail. And so, okay, now we need a $75,000 parking lot. Well, wait a second, this free land wasn't so free anymore. And it's not easy land, so
No.
a parking lot's not, so that's what I'm just trying to figure out what we're committing to.
I think it's most of the houses in that area that would be basically using it. I don't think people would be driving there to use the walking.
Right.
Although there may be some.
I was gonna say, my family has gone over to, the graveyard over across from Fort Mitchell in the Highland Cemetery. I mean, they literally have built parking lots for people to come park and you could go on their
Yeah.
walking trails. They're fabulous. I mean, it's really, really nice. So I could see it being developed for that.
Here's
someday.
a thought, because one of the things that the municipal order talks about use as a recreational area. We could say use as a conservation area.
Yeah.
That way, that's what we've done with the park, because right now it's zoned R1C. It would seem prudent for us, if we do take it, is to change the zoning so it's not R1C anymore, and make it conservation. The concern I have is what your concern is, because I've walked back there, is this is somebody, when you look at the way the subdivision plat was made, this was intended to be the driveway to access these 3 lots. And it appears, based at least on this drawing, is that that driveway, unless it's separately part of these 3 lots, is probably part of these 2 lots with an easement through it. So that begs the question,
So is this?
if somebody uses it, wants to drive there, how do they get there? Where do they park? And more importantly, who takes care of the easement area?
So we cut out a walking trail.
So Mike, if you could clarify that on the easement, but.
I like the idea of keeping it as green space. If people want to walk through the woods, fine. Cutting out a walking path in a hilly area may be more than we want to do, and keeping those up
Then there's
with
maintenance.
erosion could cause us money problems down the line.
Yeah, not looking at the terrain of that, those lots compared to the terrain that goes down to your, park. I mean, yours is mild compared to that.
Yeah, the only thing, I agree with that. The only thing I was thinking is, would that, or could that potentially be a Eagle Scout project at some point that, but to your point, even after it's done, then there's upkeep, and then now we're committing our public works to cleaning up the trash and emptying the garbage and mowing and cutting. It's a
Cutting
fair
down
question.
trees and.
Right, yeah, trees fall and, exactly.
Well, that's something that could be done, is contact the neighbors and ask them if they would like a walking trail there.
Or if they just want to keep it as a green space.
I know I've talked to
What if we change the
I gave it a heads
municipal
up.
order to be conservation or recreation?
Yeah.
And add that verbiage in there. If we want to leave it as green space, that just leaves the foliage there and it's there, great. If not, I think it's a great idea, Matt, because.
The foliage isn't there the whole year. Trust me, I know this. I know this, I see all the activity in
And
the
I think
park.
there are
Let's put
some
it that
power
way.
lines back there, are there not?
Yes,
I think it's underneath some
Oh,
power
well, then
lines.
Duke
Matter of fact, the
needs to go
driveway
through there.
is right underneath the power.
It's right in the power line, right.
That's why it's.
And I thought that's, I kind of vaguely remember that those were there, and that's probably why those lots have never come out of the topography.
Well, that's why those
They're never
lots
gonna
took
sell.
a long, long time
Topography
before they ever
under
developed,
like-
because they were originally actually lots and they were developed.
Or they were for sale.
For a
in
long
fact.
time.
And that's why he's decided to
Yeah.
use the tax.
If my recollection serves me right too, those lots, and we would have to pull out the subdivision plat, but those lots sort of go straight and then follow the terrain. So it's not just, a
It's perfect square.
perfect square, or it may be a little longer. Yep, that begs the other question.
Is it a rhombus?
Rhombus? And I saw some.
Showing off my 8th grade math that I do with my
Ask
daughter
these-
every Tuesday
ask
night.
these guys.
Yeah, that's a smart guy. Yeah.
What's in back of the property?
What used to
Does
be-
it just go downhill?
It goes down the hill, there's a stream that runs through it, that runs into Pleasant Run Creek. But if you go all the way down the hill, you come out in the parcel that used to be the trailer park.
Oh, got that far down,
Way down.
wow.
Yeah, it is.
That'd be
It's literally,
horrifying.
it's gotta be a 400-foot drop.
Ooh, liability. Liability.
Hey, Mike, would you look at the map? The black line, and I don't know if the black outline is the actual area we're talking about here, but on the,
Got right over there.
I don't even know the direction. Off of Bromley Road, there's a lot, 1779, I think.
That's
That's the
this lot.
1779
So
high
high
water.
water.
High water.
So it's at 2 on
200
Riverwatch and
One
1
on
high
on,
water.
Right.
okay, so that.
And
you said
that
you
was
checked
the
that.
question, and I haven't seen that, but that was the question, does it have frontage on high water?
It does.
Yeah.
So you do have.
So
a-
could you access it from high
You
water?
do have an access point on high water, yeah, here it is,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Okay, yep.
Because if you see that lot, this is the hill, that lot runs around the base of the hill. And actually does come out on the high water. So but the problem
There's a
is,
creek right
you've got a
there.
creek over there.
Yeah.
A big one.
And it goes, yeah. That's a sarcastic.
That's a technical topography term?
What is that term?
So to clarify, we're accepting this with no strings attached.
Right.
Correct.
So we're gonna change it
Yeah, I mean,
to
it goes all the way across.
conservation.
Conservation,
Additional parkland
recreation.
or conservation area,
Yeah.
is that-
That's very nice.
Conservation, recreation.
Residents.
I can make that correction tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
First,
That was first reading, right?
Just one other
Oh, that was
question.
municipal.
It's a municipal order.
One other question, because of the
Second.
fact that it's platted, does it need to be surveyed? Because you're not only going through Crescent Springs, but you're also going into another city. The adjoining lots on this side are in Villa Hills.
Right, but these
The
three
adjoining
lots,
lots are in Crescent Springs.
these three lots are in Crescent Springs.
Right. And it would seem to me, because it's platted, you probably don't need it surveyed.
I
But
wouldn't think so. I'll double check, but I wouldn't think so.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
I thought Carter did.
Carter's already seconded.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back it down.
Roll call.
Christy Arlinghouse.
Yes.
Carter Dickerson.
Yes.
Bob Mueller.
Yes.
Mike Daughtry.
Yes.
Matt Zek.
Yes.
Tom Bergamini.
it's conservation and recreation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion passes unanimously. Sir, did you have anything that you wanted to address council on?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I have a question. Where do we stand with the TIF, the economic development piece?
Jim just submitted his statement of work and quote. The statement of work went to the mayor for review and signature. Mike looked at it and said it was fine. George looked at it and said it was okay. So the scope of work is he'll develop a report, much like he did for Union, as long as you use an example. And then based on that, sort of recommend, okay, here are the things we think you would be able to offer that would benefit you, one of which is a TIP, which has its whole own set of administrative stuff to do, but he'll help us do that. And he has continued to say he'll use all the expertise sitting here to help defray the cost.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or?
These young gentlemen are from,
You guys have any
They're
questions?
from
Dixie
Dixie
Heights.
Heights High
do
School.
you all have anything you would like to add or comment or nothing at all?
You were off
Go
today, though, right?
Cubcat?
You had a snow day and came to Cal.
Oh, wow.
Not a thing. So what do you,
None of them fell asleep though, that was impressive.
You the teacher?
so do you have to report back to your civics class or where? Okay, so what are you gonna say?
We had a snow day and we came to council. Give us an A.
Give us a couple hours
I make a
off.
motion to
Let me
adjourn.
ask you this, sir.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Is that man gonna turn 18? We're all freshmen.
Oh, okay, you're all freshmen.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.